You got the Mac guys here on Birds 365. We're lucky enough to have one of the best to ever play the linebacker position for the Philadelphia Eagles join us. You certainly recognize the face from the Eagles postgame show here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel, Mr. Seth Joyner. Been a minute, Seth. How you been?
I'm always good, gents. Just busy, but it's all good.
All right, number 59 for 500, Seth, our 500 show. So we got an all-pro linebacker to celebrate with us. Good to see you, buddy. I haven't seen you since the Super Bowl post-game show, which didn't go the way the Eagles like. There's been a lot of changes since then. The Eagles have lost 10 players, 7 starters, 5 on defense. They've only added pretty much these 1 year, as Howie calls them, lottery tickets. We'll start with the defense since that's your wheelhouse. What do you think? And the shift to Sean Desai is going to play the same scheme, but not with the same talent.
It'll be very interesting to see how this defense comes around. I think we all knew that this was going to happen, that there was going to be a purge on the defensive side of the ball. That Howie's going to have to work some magic in order to get this team back in, into a competitive space because, if they can't get back defensively where they were, and let's just be honest, they're not going to get 70 sacks next year. I don't care, who the heck they go and get. Those things are anomalies. Those are like, 27 and 2. Those will never happen again. But, you've got to get back to some semblance of what you were. So, my biggest worries are, the defensive tackle position. I heard you guys talking about bringing in, drafting, an offensive lineman, that's not necessarily out of the question. I'm the one that's greatly in favor of, moving up even if you have to with 10 and 30 and go get Jalen Carter. I think he's a difference maker. I think he puts your defense somewhat back where it was, from an interior defensive lineman situation is where it was last year. Not too worried about linebackers because, they're not worried about it, it seems. They've been they've been stopgap in that position, for the last 10, 15 years. Not that I would say that it works. People were excited about what we saw out of the two, out of Kazir White and, primarily TJ Edwards last year. But, I think that, both of those guys are tackling machines. Between the two of them, I think they had 3.5 sacks all year, maybe 1 interception between the two of them. So from a playmaking standpoint, you're not losing a whole lot there, but tacklers, so if you can go find guys that can find the ball and make tackles, if that's your mode of operation, then that's repairable. The other position is safety. I guess they're banking on what Reed Blankenship can bring to the table. And you bring in a bunch of guys that, again, like you said, could be 1 year lottery tickets or stopgaps. Let's, see if we can go and find a guy that can replicate some of what, Gardner Johnson did for this defense last year. But I think it's going to be a wait and see rather, because, you may be running a similar defense, but the terminology is going to be different. The things you're asked are going to be different, of the team. The expectations on the defensive line are going to be similar, but I'm not so sure that they can even match, the level of play that they had last year. So we're in wait and see mode. I'm not worried about the other side of the football. I'm really, really worried about what they're going to look like defensively.
All right, Seth, we got limited looks last year, his first year in the league as an Eagle. Well, we did get a chance to see him play at Georgia, where he was the best linebacker in the country. Can the Kobe Dean be more than just a stopgap linebacker?
I think if you can protect him, yeah. One of the things that really surprised me when I watched him on the field playing is how small he is.
Yeah.
He's
you
not
see
very
him in the
big.
Locker room, Seth. It's a lot. They list him at 220, but I don't think he's 220. And I
Well,
don't know
even
what
with,
I'm going to guess you played at about 245,
yeah,
somewhere in that range.
yeah, and I
Nicholas
get it.
Morrow might be smaller than Nakobe Dean. It's crazy.
And the thing is, I get it because this is a new NFL. The way that you play defense, you want speed guys at the linebacker position. But I also think that it becomes an Achilles heel, if you will. If that guy doesn't know how to read what he sees and you can't protect him, and that's been an issue in the run game. As good as the Eagles defense was last year, they gave up 121 yards a game on the ground. If things keep trending the way it is trending, and people will say that it's not, but teams are starting to run the football a little more. Last year, the runs in the National Football League were up, over what it's looked like, the previous couple of years. Then that's problematic because if you got what you had last year and you couldn't get the run stop, what are you going to look like this year from the interior standpoint? The linebackers always look to me like they're lost, like they're not sure where they fit. Then you take a guy like Nakobe Dean, who is barely 6 foot tall, to your point, it's probably 220, 215 pounds. And you're taking on a guy that you're giving away 110, 115 pounds to. That's just not a great formula. But the one thing he can do is he can run. And the limited time that he did get to play, he got in there and he made some tackles and he made some plays. So all of this is just wait and see. Jordan Davis, can he rush the passer? I read the article where Howie was talking about, the conversation that went on in the room about, why this guy is sliding last year. And someone said, well, we're not sure whether he can be a pass rusher. And his question was, oh, okay, well, why not? You can ask why not, and you could put the onus on Tracy Rocker to turn him into a pass rusher. But if he isn't putting in the work and he's not getting his weight down, to a point where he can be a 3-down player, then, you got some problems because, to move up to 13 to draft a defensive tackle that's only a 2-down player, that's a major problem.
Yeah, Davis is interesting, and Jody can tell you, Seth. I've been saying since they drafted him, I think he was too esoteric for Philadelphia, because he is you think about what went on at Georgia. I mean, he tied up the blockers and Nakobe made the plays, and they're trying to duplicate it. And I've used Haloti Ngata as the comparison. Haloti was, I think, the 12th overall pick when he came in, but he wasn't a pass rusher. He was just a big nose tackle. I think he had 35 sacks in 14 years. But he was like a 5-time All-Pro early in his career. He did his job. Mm-hmm. If Jordan Davis turns into Haloti Ngata, is that good enough? Or does he have to turn into a pass rusher? Because I got to be honest with you. I don't think he's turning into a pass rusher. That's just me.
Well, Jody, let me tell you something, man. I think that players can be turned into what they need to turn into if they're willing to put in the work. It's not easy. I wasn't a great pass rusher, when I first got to the Birds. I mean, I was more of a run stopper. I could play some man-to-man, those things. But, I had great examples around me and great examples in the league. And Buddy would make us go down with the defensive linemen, doing pass rush and get in pass rushes every single day, So you work on your craft and you master your craft in the off season. What's Jordan Davis's, biggest issue right now? He's got to get a pro body. He still has a college body. Okay. He's a massive kid. You know where he's going to align. They don't move him. They don't loop him. They don't do a whole lot. So you know where he's going to be every single play. He's got to get down, in my opinion, to 320 to 330. Okay. He's got to, transform some of that baby fat into muscle. And then he's got to get on a jump rope. He's got to get on a ladder, maybe take a tap class, whatever it takes. You can see that he's got decent feet, but pass rushing is all about, the foot movement, foot quickness, and moves. And when you've been the biggest kid on the football field your entire career, and they've carved out a niche for you to be, a run stopper, be able to hold a double team at the point, and that's what you get comfortable doing, then that's what you're comfortable doing. The only way you get better at something is you get uncomfortable at working at it until it becomes, a point of mastery for you, and as a player, you got to want to get better. It's like quarterbacks. It's like Jalen Hurts last year. He went to the offseason last year, and everybody was just complaining about, I don't know if this guy has the arm strength. I don't know if he can find the accuracy. There was a lot of questions. But what did he do? He went to work. He went and found someone that could help make him a franchise quarterback, and look at the results. So I'm not one of those people that believe that a guy can't do it. It's just, does he want to do it? And is he willing to really put in the hard work to get there?
When Jonathan Gannon became the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, no one was shocked.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. That was for John.
Knew it was coming, that there was a good chance he was going to get a head coaching gig, and sure enough, he did, which means the Eagles had to replace him. And a lot of people thought it would be easy, that Denard Wilson would move from DB coach, being Gannon's right-hand man, and the Eagles' desire to keep the system as close to the one that they had under Gannon in place. They interviewed Wilson. They brought in Sean Desai from outside the organization, and that's who they ended up hiring. They decided to go a little bit different than what most people thought was going to happen. Did the Eagles get their new defensive coordinator hire right?
Well, I think they got it right, because I believe that this, and I'm saying they got it right because this is the guy, in my opinion, that Nick Sirianni wanted. I think what we saw out of Jonathan Gannon was as much as what Nick Sirianni wanted as is what Jonathan Gannon wanted to put on the field. Listen, I believe that Nick Sirianni is, if he had his druthers, that Vic Fangio would probably be his defensive coordinator. The way it played out with the Eagles making it all the way to the Super Bowl, he lost out on that opportunity because Vic couldn't wait, for things to play out and Jonathan to leave. So I think what winds up happening is, he's looking at the situation and saying, okay, Sean Desai is more closer to Vic Fangio, than my guy here, because he coached with him, he came up with him. So the mentality is, this is how I know that this is how this guy, sees defense. I also believe that, and I don't know it to be factual, but I think that, just the reaction and how the departure with Denard Wilson happened after everything was said and done, that there was some philosophy differences, that maybe Denard felt like, he wanted to play the game a little bit differently than Jonathan Gannon actually called the game. And, Nick Sirianni looked at the situation and was like, because, if you go all the way back to the bye week, there were some really telling things that Nick said in defense of Jonathan Gannon. He talked about, backing off when they got a lead, because you remember the early part of the season, the Eagles would jump out in a big lead on a team, and all of a sudden they come back in the third quarter and they were scrambling like crazy down the stretch, trying to figure out, how to get the win. Instead of being aggressive against some of those younger quarterbacks, some of those quarterbacks, who hadn't played a whole lot of ball, they sat back and let these guys, get their confidence back. You can see it in game one against the Detroit Lions. They started off, they got behind, but when they got back ahead in that football game, and they had Jared Goff absolutely rattled, he called the dogs off, and Nick Sirianni talked about that, because he was asked by someone about playing a little more aggressive on the defensive side of the ball, and he defended it and pretty much said, hey, we got the lead. We felt comfortable, so I kind of talked to Jonathan about, pulling off a little bit. I think that the way that they play defense is the way that Nick Sirianni believes that you play defense in the National Football League. His motto is create explosive plays on offense and prevent explosive plays on defense. And if that's his motto, then that's the way they're going to play defense. And we're in for a few more years of what we've been watching over the last 2 years. A lot of people will say, hey, at least we got to the Super Bowl. But I'm not one of those people that are fans of how they play the game.
I'm with you. People think Seth and I disagree a lot on the post-game show, but we actually have the same. Jody knows as well. I don't like it. I don't like the scheme. I just try to tell people what they're trying to accomplish, and I'm glad, Seth, you brought up the fact that Nick Sirianni says it all the time. Turnovers limit explosive plays defensively. He said it. He must have said it 10 times last year. It's the same with Howie as a GM when he says, we're gonna draft offensive defensive line. That's what we're gonna do. That's how we're gonna roll, he said. And people are always shocked he didn't take the wide receiver or the running back or the skill position player or the sexier choice. Nick tells you what he wants defensively, and that's limiting explosive plays. He says it all the time. So we have that baked in. From your perspective, Seth, knowing that's the scheme they want, what do they have to do better to get over the top? Just situational football? Nick Martin, 215-pound linebackers, did they need different traits? Did they need more aggressive safeties? When it comes to playmaking, when the ball's in the air, you can't get much more aggressive than CJ was. But if we all agree this is the system they're going to play, what do they need to do better?
Well, the first thing they gotta hope that they can get close to 50 sacks next year. That's the first thing. Because if you're going to play that way and put all the onus and put all the responsibility on the defensive front, to save you during, in passing situations. And, let me just say this. I believe that, let's go back to the Super Bowl for a sec. To a man, everybody on the Eagles said, hey, listen, we all had to play on the same field. That's such nonsense, John. It's absolute nonsense. I applaud them and I give them the thumbs up because they didn't cry over spilt milk the way the 49ers did. But the crux of that defense, what made that defense great last year, was their pass rush.
Yeah.
Okay. And the field nullified it for the defense. Because there were plenty of times where they were right there and they couldn't get there because of the field, okay? When you post 70 sacks, that's the strength of your defense. And when you can't keep your feet every time you're trying to turn the corner against a marginal, average at best offensive line, you're going to tell me that that's not a disadvantage? That wasn't who the Kansas City Chiefs defense is. Yeah, I'm still a little salty. I'm still not over it. That's not who the Kansas City defense is. That's not – yeah, Chris Jones, yeah, but you can double him and take him away. But you weren't worried about their edge rushers. You weren't worried about them, really applying pressure in a four-man rush because that's not who they were. That's not what they were last year. They were more of a blitzing defense, if Chris Jones wasn't just wrecking shop. So there was a massive advantage from that standpoint. They still got the guys on the outside that are going to be productive. They need to get the push on the inside. How are you going to replace? How are you going to replace 11 sacks with Hargrave? That's a big deal. I get it. You undervalue, you devalue the linebacker position because you've been doing it for so long. But look at the great defenses in the National Football League. Not only in my era, but even right now, all the great defenses have at least one really good linebacker. They just do. You know,
I would argue the Eagles had one last year, and they let him walk for $6.5 million. I know TJ's not Fred Warner, but here's my point. My only point is this, Seth. They finally developed a linebacker who was pretty good player, and they let him walk. And now we're back in this Paul Warlow, L.J. Bort, Eric Wilson sort of, tumble washing machine with Nicholas Morrow. He's not TJ Edwards. I'm not saying TJ Edwards is Seth Joyner, but TJ's a pretty good player. They developed him. They should take pride in that because he was an undrafted kid, and they still let him walk. That's how much they devalue the position.
Well, listen, I knew the minute that he got the offer sheet that he was gone, that they weren't going to match that number. You know, they just don't look at the line. Look at what they extended him to. You know, when he became the starter and they extended him, I think they extended him something like, 1.3 or 1.5, 1.6, somewhere in there. I mean,
yeah, but that was bookkeeping because he was undrafted. So he didn't have that fourth year. So they basically took away his restricted year, gave it to him. And
yeah, but if you're
when it came up to his unrestricted year, they just said 6.5 is too much.
But if you're going to, if that guy's going to be your starter, then pay him like your starter. Because the year before, he earned the fact that he was going to be the starter coming into this year. Okay, so then pay him like a starter.
Right.
You know, I'm pretty sure that 1.3 to 1.5 isn't the average, for starting linebackers. At least you can start there, to get the guy to a point where he feels like, oh, they're really, they value me. But that sent the message that they didn't value him. So the first opportunity he got to get the hell out of Dodge, of course he was going to take it and he was going to leave. You're limited. It's like these guys aren't playing 13, 14 years, like I did. They're just not, so they got to hurry up and get their money while they can get their money. And for him to come back and give them another discount, that didn't make any sense whatsoever,
Right.
But I'm really of the belief that, I was disappointed by what I saw at the linebacker position. Yeah, at 130, 140, 150 plus tackles, that's a big deal. But stop and think about it. You're also playing 17 games and throw in 3 more, with the playoffs and the Super Bowl. That's a lot of games. You should be averaging somewhere as a linebacker, somewhere around, 8 to 12 tackles a game. And that shouldn't be a big deal. That should be part of your job description. But what I need to see out of the linebackers, give me a guy that can rush the passer every once in a while. When I send him, I know that he can get there at least 50 to 60% of the time. Give me a guy who's going to drop, be able to read, routes, get his eyes on the quarterback, and be able to give me, 3 or 4 interceptions a year. Give me a guy that's going to cause, 4 or 5 fumbles when they get to the point of attack, on that 140 tackles a game. I didn't see that. And to me, that's what the Eagles are missing. That's what, in my opinion, stops them from being, a dominant defense when you can pass rush the way that you can, is that guy who's going to control what goes on at that second level from the running game perspective. But you can also count on that, guys, to make some plays along the way to help shift the dynamic of what's happening in game, to giving us a positive as to how the game is going to be determined.
Seth, the linebacker you described, TJ Edwards was not that player. The Eagles didn't have that player. Very few teams in the National Football League had that player. There's like 4 or 5 of them in the entire league, the way you just described them. Surely the Eagles didn't have them, but there's a whole bunch of teams didn't have that player either.
Nick Morrow's not that guy.
He's not that player. No. All right, last question for me, Seth, and I have to ask this because when I'm asked the question down the road, I can say, here's what Seth told me. Do you have any desire to be a football coach in the National Football League?
Man, this thing just won't die, will it, John?
No, it won't. I get asked it a couple of times here. Well, why don't they just make Seth the linebacker coach? Why don't they make Seth the defensive coordinator? Yeah, I got to answer the questions, so I'd rather have the answer come from the source.
You know what? If the situation and the opportunity was right, I would give it deep consideration. It's not that thing that I go and I chase. You know, I get people all the time, you know, whether it's social media or when I do shows like this, you know, oh, you know, he talks like he knows everything. You know, why isn't he a coach? You know, he's not a coach because of, you know, his mentality and the way that he is. Listen, if I really wanted to pursue it, then I could be a quality control guy somewhere for a year or two and slowly move up if that's what I wanted to do. You know, it's not, if I was like 40 something, Jody, you know, I might think about it. When I was 40, I didn't really think about it. But now, man, I love what I do. And somebody's going to have to come get me and convince me to do something different. You know, listen, last year I did 3 TV shows and a radio show, you know, every single week. And I got to just talk about football. It's what I love to do, talk about football. Now, can I take some of what's in here and some of what's in my heart and pour it into some young players? Sure, you know, but the situation's got to be right for me. If it ain't right for me, I'm not stepping out of my comfort zone of working 5 to 6 months a year and then being able to travel with my lady and, you know, enjoy my off season playing golf. Because when you coach, that's what you coach. You coach all year long. You might. What do you get? 2 weeks off, John?
Yeah,
you get
this
2 weeks. 2 weeks out of 50 weeks, and you go from, you know, preparing for the draft to OTAs to training camp. From training camp into the season, you got a long season. As soon as the season is over, depending on how far you get in the playoffs, boom, you're right back into evaluating players, you know, for the draft. Then you got to go to the combine. It's just a never ending, you know, and listen, you got to love it. And I love the game. I love watching film. I love evaluating film. I love all of those things, you know. But if it's not the right situation and it's not worth my while to dive in, because I know how I am, I'm going to be there early and I'm going to be there late, the same way I was when I was a player. And if I'm going to commit myself that way, then it damn well better be worth it, you know, from a lot of different perspectives.
Nah, I got to tell you, I'm hoping you never take the gig because we need you here on our show, on the JAKIB Media Postgame Show. Yeah, we kind of need you elsewhere. So if you don't get that coaching gig, perfectly fine with us. Well, I would like to see you coach. So I'm not getting the answer I want, but I appreciate the fact that you were as honest with us as you were. That's why Seth Joyner,
you know what
he does.
Jody, you know what I would really love to do? What would allow me to, you know, maintain what I'm doing, but also be able to feed, you know, maybe that small desire to coach within me is maybe some consulting to come in and, you know, somewhere and work with linebackers, you know, in the off season, or, you know, work with a team a couple of days. I mean, a lot of teams do that where they bring a guy in and say, okay, you know, we want to work on pass rush. We don't work on this. We don't work on that, you know. Now that I'd be very open to, but the full grind, 365 days a year, at this point in my life, I don't know about that.
You should start linebacker U out in Arizona. Everybody wants to be in Arizona anyway. So after your 18 holes, start linebacker U.
That's got to be before it.
Yeah, got to be before it. Yeah.
The 18 holes are key, and the lady is the key, as he certainly told us here today.
Yeah.
Seth, great stuff. Always a pleasure, brother. We try and tap into you every once in a blue moon. We don't want to be bothering you every single week. So when we do ask, thank you very much for saying yes. Thanks for saying yes today and being part of our 500th show.
Hey, listen, man, anytime, you know, I apologize for the confusion a couple of days ago. And, you know, you guys know I really got to like you guys, man, to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning.
We appreciate it, buddy.
He likes McMullen on the postgame show. He beats up enough of him on the postgame show. He feels he owes him a little bit after the season's over and done with. Seth, great stuff. Thank you very much for jumping in with us today.
You got it, guys. Have a good one.
Seth Joyner here with us on Birds 365. All right, quickie timeout. We come back with What a Bow on the show. Keep it right here on Birds 365.